Tom Dunphy, how are you, mate?
I'm great, brother. How are you?
Very well, thank you, mate. It's nice to have you on the podcast, mate. I've been eager to get you on. I've had some amazing guests on the podcast, and I want you to tell everyone about how we met and what you've been doing lately.
Yeah, cool. So obviously you're an unleashed weapon. So the first time that we met was in the gym, the jiu-jitsu gym. So we used to train together a few years ago now. Probably it was probably like 5, 6 years ago. We used to
Yeah,
train out of the same jiu-jitsu gym under Matt Cooper, and that all sort of split up for different reasons. So we went down different paths, and not long after that gym split up, actually, I got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, so I was quite ill for a little while, and that was in between running my own businesses, me and my wife's jewelry company, and also have an online e-commerce business I was running at the time within cannabis consulting and medical cannabis consulting. And what that whole journey taught me, that healing journey taught me, is it was very much to do with where my mindset was at that particular time. And I had already had an interest in like hypnosis and neuro-linguistic programming, and then when I went down that path of that illness and that journey and that healing, I really dived a lot deeper into the hypnosis side of things and the neuro-linguistic programming side of things. And I knew to get through that journey it was going to have to be having my mindset in the right place, because it's a very big mental battle you've got to go through. So I had 13 months of chemotherapy, had a stem cell transplant, and spent a little bit of time in ICU as well, and had a very long healing journey from that moment onwards. And the thing that I love to talk about is like bad things happen for you, not to you. And
yeah,
in hindsight, it's one of the greatest things that happened to me, because it really shifted my path away from what I thought I was passionate about in the business I was in to actually what I was really passionate about was about working with people's mind and mindset. Because a massive thing that happened for me through that process was the anxiety, the stress, all the stuff that comes along with going through a diagnosis and treatment like that. It was very familiar to me and something that I had experienced already in my behavioural patterns. So I became very curious about why these behavioural patterns play out. Like obviously I'd never been through something as traumatic as what I'd been through that I was consciously aware of, though I had the same feelings come up. I'd felt this anxiety before, I'd felt this stress before, I'd felt this worry before, felt all these fears that came along with it. And I thought, I really want to dive deeper and get curious about this, so I did. And that's where I went down the path, basically becoming a life coach and a mindset coach, and really working out the physiology, the focus, and the spirituality that goes into getting your mindset in the right place to head toward what you want in life.
yeah. It was such heartbreaking news, mate. I heard about it. I think it was back in 2017. Was it, Tom? You said
No, it was late
2016.
2018. Late 2018 it was.
2018. Yeah, it was such heartbreaking news, mate, because I knew you from jiu-jitsu. You were a close mate, and you're such a nice guy. And yeah, that what you just said with regards to people, life doesn't happen to you; it happens for you. And I mean, what a traumatic experience, and how that has shaped who you are today, and it's made you into the person you are. And yeah, it really upset me at the time, but then I look back on it and then watched you and watched your journey and where you are today, and the impact that you're making, and the positivity and the amount of value that you're giving to so many people. And you left an impression on me, mate. I think you said we are a product of our limiting beliefs and what we do with our subconscious mind. Can you tell us a little bit about the subconscious mind, mate, and how that reflects our life, and how the subconscious mind influences our day-to-day go about?
Yeah, for sure. And, you were actually one of the very first people that reached out to me not long after I sort of put the news out to get diagnosed. And I always remember that, and I'm always appreciative. You were the first person to just jump on the phone. You didn't even have my number. You rang me through Facebook Messenger and you said, mate, I'm here if you need anything. And, it's things like that that are really important to know, that although it was really hard for me, and that was a life-changing experience in itself, when I went down that path of curiosity of figuring out where these behavioural patterns and these fears come from, is that there's actually a lot of hard stuff that happens to us when we're younger, right? And your hardest moment is your hardest moment, right? And a lot of people look at my journey and they go, oh, I can't even imagine how you went through that, yet they haven't consciously remembered a lot of things that's actually happened to them throughout their childhood, throughout their life, through their teen years. There's a lot of traumatic things that happen for a lot of people. And they could be as small as your older brother stealing your lollipop off you. But there's an emotional response that happens with that, which gets stored in our unconscious mind. And like you said, you want to know a little bit more about that unconscious mind and the product of the programming that we have and these patterns that we have. And it's exactly that. When we go through these traumatic events, and we experience some type of emotion, and it's usually, there's a few different emotions that generally all of us with our major negative emotions we experience, and that's anger, fear, sadness, hurt, and guilt. You've also got shame and grief, which are another big emotional reaction that we can have to certain things. And when we experience those things in our mental body, what happens is our unconscious mind is like a protection mechanism. It essentially takes over and goes, well, this is really hard, this is traumatic, we don't like this feeling, we don't like this fight or flight response, we don't like this emotion that's happening. So what it does, it's got a memory organizing tool where it just basically goes in, it represses that feeling, that event in your unconscious mind, and it locks it away. And it either locks it away permanently, so it's really hard to access, or it locks it away and it makes you in the future want to come up and essentially resolve this traumatic event or resolve this emotion that's come up. And what happens then is that plays out in different areas of our life. And what I was talking about is these behavioural patterns that I had coming up for me when I was going through a traumatic event, like fear, and there's procrastination because I don't know what my future's like, and there's all these different things we go on. And these map across to many areas of life, like self-confidence, right? Building a business, building an online business, or forming a relationship, or being a parent. All these areas we think, maybe we're not good enough, or maybe we're not lovable, or maybe we're not worthy. These are the three kind of core beliefs that our unconscious mind forms when we go through these traumatic processes, and they get stored away. We're not super conscious of them, and it changes our behaviour. So on the surface level, it's going to manifest in things like anxiety, stress, self-confidence issues, self-doubt, procrastination, all these things that prevent us from moving forward towards what we want in life, essentially. And the difference between the conscious and the unconscious mind is, like, your conscious mind is the goal setter. So it's like you write something down, I want to lose 10 kilos. Your unconscious mind is the goal getter. So when we work with the unconscious mind, it's about really going in and tapping into all the limiting beliefs are there, all the things and limiting decisions that hold us back, so we can break through those, so we can tick our conscious goals off. And another level of understanding for the unconscious mind, it's a little bit confusing, is your unconscious mind is the one that you're essentially not conscious of. It makes your eyes blink, your heart beat, your lungs fill with air, your blood pressure. So all that stuff's happening without us being conscious of it, right? We never focused on our breathing or our heartbeat. And it's the same when these traumatic events happen. They get stored away. We never focused on them. We're never conscious of them, but they bring up this other stuff on a conscious level.
Yeah, Tom, it's fascinating, mate. You know what's truly remarkable about the human brain is, I think Bruce Lee said this, don't ever talk down to yourself. I can't remember how it goes. He said something like this: don't ever talk down to yourself. Your brain or body doesn't know what to differentiate it, but it's something along those lines. So if you talk down on yourself and you reflect on, I'm not worthy, things like that, it has such a negative impact. And I think they've done studies on this too, where they've done it with plants, where people have talked negatively to plants, And then they talked positively to plants. And I think the positivity that they told the plant, it was thriving and blooming. And then the one that they were talking negatively to, it started to deteriorate. And it's quite fascinating, mate, because I think the human mind is a remarkable piece of machinery. And it's such an important thing that we need to understand on what we feed it, with regards to not just nutrition and exercise, but also what we feed our mind. What is some of the courses and things that you've learned with regards to neurochemistry and understanding the human brain? And
Yeah.
I'd like to know more about that, mate, because it's fascinating.
Yeah, and it's funny that you go into that and what Bruce Lee said, because he's dead right. And the other thing about the unconscious mind is that it doesn't process negatives. So an example of that, like let's say if you've got children, right, and you say, don't jump off that wall. The unconscious mind doesn't process the negative aspect of it. So all your child hears is jump off that wall. And it's the same with when, like exactly what you're saying, the way that we talk to ourselves. And this is why what you're asking me here, one of the modalities that I've trained in, I'm a master practitioner in neuro-linguistic program, which is neuro meaning the mind, language, obviously linguistics meaning language, and then the programming. So the programming of the mind and the language. And the language is such a really important part of it. And I want to break it down like focus on, and I would include your language in that as well. You've got your physical body, which is your nervous system and how it reacts and responds to emotions and different events. They also get stored in your body, like you can get a bit of a stress loop that happens on your nervous system, and that can trigger thoughts and behaviors as well. And then to me, you've got the spiritual body, and everybody has different spiritual beliefs, and to me, the easiest way that I can explain a spiritual aspect of ourselves is basically like your highest version of yourself. So somebody that you envision of being the most perfect health, fittest, healthiest, in a relationship, wealthy, everything you want and dream of. That's your higher self, and it's a knowing that that's there and that exists, and that also exists in a plane where it can pull you up to that level. So if you get rid of all those thoughts and all the bad language and all that sort of stuff, you can get yourself up to another plane and operate on that higher self. So the language aspect is really important, because the way that you talk to ourselves, especially in repetition, is what programs our mind to start taking action toward things. And it's something that I know you've coined this and said this before. It's like where focus goes, energy flows. So what you're focusing on, your energy is going to go there. So if your language is focused around, I can't do that, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, no one will love me, oh, you're an idiot. Our unconscious mind is just programming this into us. It's programming it into our mind and our body. So it's very important how you use your language. And it's something that you'll hear a lot. Like you ask someone, how are you going? You go, not too bad. It's like not too bad or not too good.
Yeah.
I hope it doesn't rain. And again, not processing negative. You're hoping for something. It doesn't process the negative. All you're focusing on is rain. You're manifesting rain into your life. I know it's more than that in regards to the universe, but this is just a sort of snapshot of how your mental focus, your language, and your body all pointing towards what you want to grab in life.
Yeah, mate. It's truly remarkable. Your mind is the most powerful weapon, and yeah, you would never talk about yourself the way you would talk to a friend, a close friend, or a relative. People really do, mate. It's a sickness. It is. Yeah, we all have self-doubt. We all have imposter syndrome. We all have times of adversity and struggle, but at the same time, yeah, what we do and how we act and how we talk about ourselves has a profound effect. It can actually make us very sick. It's fascinating because I was reading something a long time ago about a Shaolin Kung Fu monk, and he went under a surgical procedure without any anesthesia whatsoever, just being able to harness the power of his mind. And talk to me, mate. Talk to me about what people can do on a day-to-day basis, whether it be positive affirmations, breaking through those mental plateaus. What should that person be doing to get to a higher self?
Yeah. So it's all about your focus and your physiology, right? And then when it comes down to the language aspect of it, there's a really great thing that we can do called reframing. And we're always going to have these default mechanisms, right? And a lot of it is coming from the emotion of fear. So many of us operate in fear in so many different ways. We lack self-trust. We lack confidence. We're judgmental beings just naturally, and judgment comes from fear. Like essentially, like what judgment is if you took us back 5,000 years ago and we were walking down a path and a tiger jumped out, and we've got that fight or flight response, so that's that stress response. It's natural. It's what needs to happen. But what's happening on a conscious, like thought level, is the judgment. It's judging the situation. What do I need to do here? Do I need to run? What do I need to do? Do I need to duck? Do I need to hide? Do I need to play dead? And this is what happens when we interact with ourselves and other people as well. It all comes from a place of fear. So when you meet someone and you judge them, you're judging them from a perspective of, I'm fearful of the interaction that I'm going to have with this person. They're not quite, they're a little bit different to me. How am I judging this situation? But essentially, it's always coming from internal judgment. It's our own fear. It's like how we're judging ourselves, and how we judge ourselves, we judge other people, essentially. And when it comes to reframing in regards to that, you're always going to have this default pop up, whether it's fear. Our immediate response is like judging somebody, as an example. And then we go, let's reframe that around. Okay, that person looks funny. Let's have a little bit more discernment about how you approach situations rather than judgment. How can you have discernment? And this happens with every little thing that we say. So let's say if we hop out of bed and go, I don't think I can do this today. A simple reframe is like, no, you can do this. You've done this every other day. You've succeeded in other things. Let's map that success across to today, and let's just focus on what we need to go after. And so much of it, like I said, is just about where we focus, the direction that we focus on. And you recently did a workshop with me as well. And this is something that I talk about a lot, and it's talking about like past, present, future, and how we can move forward and with better thoughts and better reframing. It's always focusing on what you want rather than focusing on what you don't want. Like, don't focus on those negatives. Because if we're looking at the past and we're going, I don't want this pattern to play out again, but we're still looking in that direction. So if we could think about, where's your true North Star? Where are you looking? Where are you focusing on? Because the more you look back and go, I don't want this to happen, you're bringing it into the moment where you are right now, because you're thinking about that past moment and you're not thinking about the future at all. And what you're going to do is you're going to take that from the past into the present, take it into the future. So it's always about focusing forward. Obviously, it's always great to reflect and audit your life and making sure that, how could I have done this better? How could I improve? And this is something I talk about in my lot for my framework, my business, the Tom's method. I talk about it a lot, like trust, opportunity, mindset, the systems you put in place. And a lot of the opportunity and the mindset comes from, how can we continually respond to every situation where we can put a reframe on it and put a positive frame on it and focus towards what we want, rather than coming from a place of judgment, reacting with anger, reacting with fear. How do we put a positive swing on it and come from the place of, let's act as if everything that we want, that calmer self, no stress, no anxiety, more money in the bank, better family, better relationship. How can we continue focus on that? Because when we focus with that repetition, that repetition puts that program, that new program in our unconscious mind. You're always going to have those default settings, right? When you meet someone, you're going to judge them. If you come in a situation like competing in a sport, you're going to have fear come up. There's different things that are going to be your default mechanism. So a lot of reframing and focus can help us put a new pattern in that we can move towards the future without bringing the old stuff.
Yeah, mate. And this is also something that we can instill in our children because I think there's a lot of things in school that I think would benefit, especially with mindfulness, meditation practices, tackling self-doubt, imposter syndrome. And you're a father. You're in a situation now where you're raising your little fella. What are some of the things that you're going to talk to him down the line about life in general and overcoming struggle and adversity? And what are going to be some of the tools and strategies to help him throughout his journey?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And like I said, when we go through hard things in life, they generally start at childhood, right? We have
Yeah.
these our mind gets programmed between the age of, from 1 to 4, like 0 to 4 essentially, and and there's another programming process that happens between. It's actually changed over the last like decade or couple of decades. They used to think it was 0 to 4. There was a certain set of programming. Now they're thinking that go anywhere up to 7, and then from 7 to like 15, 16, there's a whole bunch of other programming that goes in there. And it's in regards to our emotions and different events that we've been through. So one of the things is we never really get taught how to process our emotions. So what happens is we get a situation where we're angry, we're upset, or we're scared, or we're guilty, or whatever the major negative emotion that comes up. I mean, we're the same age, basically, I think, and the same generation. It's like when you go through those processes, and I know my parents as well, something goes wrong, something happens, it's like, stop crying, stand up straight, be seen and not heard. There's different things where we push and we repress these emotions down. And this is this process that happens in the unconscious I was talking about earlier. When the emotion comes and we're not aware of what's happening to us physiologically or mentally, and we go, I'm not allowed to feel this, I'm being told not to feel this, I don't know how to feel this anger or this fear, we basically just store it in our nervous system and we store it in our body. So some of the things that I focus on with my son is that he gets angry, gets frustrated, throws tantrums like any other kid. And yes, I've got default mechanisms that I go back and I react as well straight away, where it's like there's anger and there's frustration. And it's just like, how come you can't just do the things that I need you to do? But you have to come from an understanding that their brain is still developing and they don't know how to process these emotions. So for me, a big thing that I go through is if he gets angry, upset, or sad, he actually even says to me now, it's been programmed, he goes, you've made me sad. If I've done something where he's not agreed with it, you've made me sad, you've made me angry, and I go, okay, what does that feel like? What do you mean angry? What do you mean sad? I'm making sure what he's feeling is aligning with the emotion that he's telling me, and I let him let it out. I let him get angry. I let him scream. Obviously there's certain situations where we calm him down and we're like, hey, the behaviour here is not matching the environment. What's going on? But it's about being aware of those emotions and then using the language as much as possible. Like I said, trying not to say those negatives like, don't jump off the couch, or make sure you don't spill that drink when you walk over to the family room. It's more about what are the toward things you can say. Hey, Teddy, keep it in the cup. I'm not saying in a negative where he's not going to process that. I'm saying more toward things. If he's jumping on the couch, I'm saying don't get down off the couch. I'm saying just careful when you're jumping on that couch. This is what can happen. There's ways that we feed information to them. Rather than stopping the processing of emotions, it's about how can we let the emotions flow? How can we make them understand the toward value of what they're doing rather than making their unconscious process that negative all the time.
Yeah. And how did you get through that adversity and struggle? Because there must have been a time when it was really difficult for you, mate, and there's that self-doubt and your brain is just ticking a million miles an hour. How were you able to utilize the tools that you have now? Like obviously you have more tools now, but what were some of the practices and daily rituals that you would say to yourself, whether it be positive affirmations and, just really trying to focus on the good things? Like, how did you get through it?
Yeah, so I did a lot of meditation and visualization. And like I said, I'd already had an interest in neuro-linguistic programming. We actually came across neuro-linguistic programming about maybe 7 or 8 years earlier to that illness that I went through. We were travelling overseas and we met some master practitioners in neuro-linguistics programming that had quite successful businesses. And we did a little bit of neuro-linguistic programming with them at the time. And it's something that I'd stayed interested in. And then I'd also, I started doing therapy sessions right before I went through the journey. Like, I think I did my first hypnotherapy session about 5 days after I did my first chemo round, because it was a very fast period of time between getting diagnosed and doing chemo. I had about 7 days to get in the hospital and do it. And then within that first week, I went and did my first hypnotherapy session. And to me, honestly, like I said, visualization meditation, I spent a lot of time visualizing the outcome of where I would be after the treatment had happened. And I looked at it from a really macro lens rather than focusing on how hard every single moment and every day was, because time slows right down when you're in that process, especially if you're too sick not to work and you're at home sitting around sick all day and you're worried about, like, all my concern was trying not to vomit and what was the next meal that I was going to eat. And that was the extent of my future thought outside of doing my visualization. And funny enough, actually, like where I sit right now, where I live on the bay side of Brisbane, I used to visualize 3 times a day that I would live out here by the water when I was going through the cancer treatment, because me and my wife would come out here and we'd walk along the water. And in the early stages of my therapy, she was pregnant with our son Teddy, and he was born about 6 months into my treatment, and he was about 3 months old when I was in ICU and passed away. I had constantly visualized, I'm going to get through this. This is what my life's going to look like afterwards. And coming full circle, we now live 5 minutes away from where I used to visualize standing, living by the water, being happy and healthy and fit. And that just shows you, obviously there's action that goes into this, right? So there's many different laws of attraction, and visualization and sort of focusing on what you want is one of them. The other one is actually taking action. And to me, it was just about daily goals, like daily wins. When I came out of ICU, I was mostly blind. I could barely walk, or I'd lost all my muscle mass. And the first day it was like, I'm going to get out of bed today and I'm going to stand up. The second day it was like, I'm going to get out of bed, stand up, I'm going to walk over to the chair. The third day I was going to get out of bed, stand up, and take myself to the toilet rather than the nurses giving me a bedpan. And then I did this, and by the 11th day I was doing laps walking around the ward, and I was home by the 12th day, which was quite amazing outside of ICU. And obviously it was a long journey after that, and then it continued. It was just daily steps. And it was like the same thing. Like, today I'm going to walk to the end of the driveway. Next week I'm going to walk to the end of the street. And I think about 6 months after I did stem cell transplant, I was walking like 5 to 10 kilometers a day with my son in the pram. And I just started with that. And I started with yoga every single day, got my body moving. Because a lot of us, and this happens when we set goals, whether it's for your relationship or your business or your career, we look at the end goal and we set a massive, massive mammoth task. And then when the first 2-3 days of moving towards that goal, we're not any closer, we give up. So it's about, like, what are the micro things you can do to get your macro goal? And to me, it was just about the micro things that I did every single day. And it was a lot like life, I had really hard days where I wanted to give up, and I had really great days where I'm like, no, I'm getting through this, And it's the same with life, A lot of people experience that on day-to-day with life. One day you'll get out of bed and you'll feel like shit. And you're like, what's the point of today? And the next day you'll wake up and go, no, I've got shit together. Like, I'm really going to get after it. And this is just the natural process of the habits that our thought processes and our behaviors happen based off all this programming that we have.
Yeah. And it's interesting you used the law of attraction. And if you think about attraction and what you want to attract and manifest, part of that is action. And if you think about successful entrepreneurs like Elon Musk, for example, that work ethic that goes into becoming successful, work, no results, work, no results. And this just goes on and on and on. And then all of a sudden, work, overnight success. And it's part of that mentality that you have to break, that you have to understand that you have to take massive action. And it's like compounding interest. It's doing the daily practices every day to get to that place where you want to be, which is what you did on your journey from cancer treatment.
Yeah.
What about when we're talking about a goal, whether it's for an athletic event or if it's for manifesting your dream partner or if it's the business and the money? What would be some of the daily practices that people should be doing to attract their desired outcome.
Yeah, so you bring up a great point there, which is obviously about, that daily action that comes down to discipline, right? Like, what systems do you have in place that are going to move you toward that goal? And that's one of the major aspects of it, is having the discipline to keep going. And why people struggle with the discipline and they struggle to see the outcome, or a lot of people really struggle to visualize as well.
Yeah.
They struggle to imagine what they're going to achieve. And that is because it's something called association and disassociation. So what happens is, and it all comes back to our unconscious programming, right? And it happens in the mind, in the body, in our spirit. And what happens is, when we experience a major traumatic event or an emotional wound, and when I say major, like I said, that can be as minor as your brother stealing your lollipop if you haven't had a super hard life and that's your hardest thing, it's still a major event to you. What happens when we go through these emotions and we store them in our body, we become disassociated. So what this means is that when we're looking at ourselves from a perspective of achieving a goal or visualizing something, we find it really hard to visualize ourselves doing it, and people get disassociated, which means we remove ourselves from our body. And often then when we do visualize, we'll visualize like us from an outside perspective, like we're watching a movie. So we'll see us maybe, let's say if it's we'll say a jiu-jitsu competition as an example. We watch ourselves on the mat in that competition, maybe going back and forward, and then maybe losing the match or maybe winning the match. But what we're not doing is we're not associating with the focus and physiology that it actually takes to achieve those things. So when I say physiology, is like you really have to feel, you have to have a feeling associated with the visions that you're having. So the big thing with any type of visualization and getting after what you want and doing that manifestation is being associated. So it's looking through your own eyes as if you're already in that place, as if you're already experiencing that. So like a simple example I could give of this is, let's say if you close your eyes down right now and you're imagining yourself on a beach. So some people, or a lot of people right now, would be looking at themselves standing on a beach, like as if it's a picture or a movie. But what I'm talking about to be associated is that you're standing on the beach and I can look down and look at my hands. So I can look down and look at my feet. I can look down and see the coffee that I'm holding. And if I was to say, if you were to pick up that coffee and know what it tastes like when you sip it, you would actually have that physiological feeling of it going, down into your stomach. And that's what I'm talking about, because you're connecting an association with the physiology. And when you're doing that, you're putting that program in your unconscious mind. You go, okay, this is what it feels like to have that thing. And if you do that with repetition associated, you're going to get that manifestation. And like I said, what's going to help people get associated is actually going back and figuring out what these traumas are and what these emotional wounds are. And it's something that, we've worked together on with you as well. It's something that you've worked through personally, and you've done a bit of that work, so you understand what I'm talking about when we talk about going back and associating with that particular event, like going back and knowing what it was like to go and process that emotion and be in that event. And once we go and we connect those dots in our unconscious, it becomes easier for us to stay associated.
Yeah, very, very well said, Tom. I can think of two examples of the law of attraction. Famously, Jim Carrey, comedian and actor, wrote a fake check for himself. I think it was for $10 million. And he put it in his wallet, and it deteriorated over and over and over time. And it's interesting, he ended up making, I think, $10 million for Dumb and Dumber. So he put the intent, he put it out there to the universe and what he wanted to achieve, and he did that. Conor McGregor famously knocked out Jose Aldo in the UFC in 13 seconds. And if you look at what he did backstage before he knocked him out, he telegraphed everything exactly to a same T. He hit him with that big left overhand right. The way he was sort of moving back and forward with Jose Aldo, he had that Bruce Lee kind of mentality. And if you watch, I think if you kind of put a picture or a video of him in the background, or the behind the scenes where he was practicing, and then how he actually knocked him out, it's almost identical, the way he moved and the way he hit him. And that's just the power of the mind and manifestation and the daily practices, mate. And would you agree that 80% of what we do, whether it be regards to business and achieving goals, comes from the brain, and 20% of it would be more skill and understanding? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and that's something I talk about a lot, is the 80-20 rule. It's like 80% mindset, 20% skill set. So the 80% mindset, and then this is like, I'm a life coach, right? And that maps across to business as well, because I've ran businesses myself, and I don't necessarily advertise myself as a business coach. Though when you come across something like someone wanting to perform in business, generally what you're going to find 80% of the time, what holds them back is their thought processes. It's about what they're focusing on, what their vision is of the company, whether they think they're good enough to achieve that. Do they have the skill set to be able to expand the team? Do they think they're good enough? All this sort of thing. And the 20% skill set is, and this is something that I talk about. I recently just did a little mindset course for younger athletes, which is I've delivered for another coaching company. It's like an online course for a fundraiser for like teen athletes in all different types of sports. And this is something that I talk about a lot, with how you build your skill set, right? So say 20% skill set. If I was to say you want to go build $1 million company, and you only need 20% of the skill set. A lot of people will be like, what do you mean? I would have to absolutely learn everything to be successful in that company. Well, not really. You just have to have the mindset to know that whatever skills you don't have, you can outsource. And all you need to focus on is what the vision and the goal is of the company, as an example. And that skill set that you need to build, the other part of building that skill set is then also having the belief that you can build that 20%. And people might have limiting beliefs around whether they're able to learn things, or whether they're able to learn new skills that are involved in business. But all I say about the skill set aspect is, what can you what success in other areas of your life can you map across to a new skill set that you need to make? And I recently just had a client as well who is learning more marketing and social media, and he's going down this route of building a fashion brand, right? And he had limiting beliefs around, I don't think I'm good enough to do this, or am I worthy enough to be this particular, like a male fashion model or whatever it might be. And I asked him, I said, what have you been successful at? He goes, oh, well, I played cricket for junior Australia, I said, what else have you been successful at? Oh, I played, A grade Premier Soccer, for such and such club. Okay. I'm like, okay, so how can you map across the success you've had there to your new skills? And the simplest version of this is, can you tie your shoes? Yeah, I can tie my shoes. Okay, how did you tie your shoes? How did you learn to tie your shoes? Well, I just did it with repetition. Like, I just did it and did it and did it and did it until one day I got the loop and I was like, I can tie my shoes. And it's the same thing. It's like, if you need to learn how to market a product, or you need to learn how to, develop and manufacture a product, it's like, you just ask questions and do repetition to build that skill set. And what's going to support that is your mind going, you can do this. It's just about mapping across success from other areas, and you will be successful.
Yeah, it's fascinating, Tom. There's a study I think I heard about where they brought some Olympic athletes from 100-meter sprint, or sprinters, and what they did was they took electrodes and they put them on their head and measured their brain waves. And what was really interesting is they told the athletes to visualize and pretend that they're starting a race. On your marks, get set, go. And what was fascinating, they did the same study when they ran a race. The same brain waves and chemical reactions in the brain fired exactly how it was when they visualized themselves doing the actual race. And this just goes to show, mate, the power of the human brain and the mind. It truly is a remarkable piece of machinery. And what you do a lot of work with personal development, and I've done some workshops with you, mate, which has been fantastic. And we dived into cold exposure and what I like to call voluntary adversity. So it's doing things that you don't want to do, which has a profound impact on your brain and your neurochemistry, especially releasing dopamine, which is the motivation for drive and focus and success. What are some things that you think has been very beneficial for you in your success, because you've done the cold exposure, you're also a martial artist, and you're putting yourself in uncomfortable positions. Talk to me about that, mate.
Yeah, it's, to me, for success for me in different areas has just been, for massive thing for me was breaking through fear. That was one of my biggest default emotions. And to me, it was like, how can I, and you said, like, you coined it perfectly, like voluntary adversity. So I would voluntarily start to lean into things that I was afraid of. And there's different ways, there's different ways to do this, because for me, I had done the work. Like, I'd done the emotional work. I'd done a lot of different therapies, and I'd done a lot of different training, a lot of similar stuff that I've done with you as well. So it's really easy to say to just lean into the fear, because some people have some really massive fears and phobias around things. But what we can do is, like, when we lean into that fear of something that we're afraid of, it doesn't mean anything about us in particular if we fail, right? Because the big thing is like, people just worry about failure, and it's a massive thing. So if we can get rid of that failure piece, and I'm going to come back to what you were saying about the athletes, right? The athlete performance, or use that as an example, because like you said, I do jiu-jitsu. The athlete performance, those studies have been around for ages, knowing that if an athlete visualizes through their own eyes exactly what they're going to do, they're going to achieve that pattern, right? And then what happens is, like, that you take that same athlete that knows that they can visualize that particular thing, and then you remove them from the environment and you put them in a social setting, and they might have social anxiety. They might struggle to build a relationship. They might not have confidence to start a business. Like, whatever, map it across to whatever you want to do. And all of this comes across from identity, because we formed an identity as an athlete. We formed an identity of those things that we're really good at, and then we kept ourselves inside that box. So when we try and move to other areas of our life, we go, oh, I was only ever good at this thing, so that means I'm not good at these other things. So it's about breaking down your identity in those moments. So a big thing for me was always breaking through, like, oh, I'm just this person who's only good at those things, or I can only do these certain amount of things because I'm afraid of all those other things. And it was about just being more flexible in my behavior. I think a massive thing was just flexibility in my behavior around, I'm going to try this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to lean into this, and I'm not going to worry about the fear, about the judgment, about the failure, because it's just a process. I know now that it's a process of repetition. So the biggest thing for me is just that process of repetition, dropping the identity piece from it, and obviously leaning into the areas that I'm afraid of. And the repetition is the discipline, it's the systems, it's all those things that come into that. And that's why, like I said, I put around Tom's method, because it's trust, right? And the opposite of, trust is putting confidence in somebody, and confidence, the opposite of confidence is fear. So that was my biggest thing in life, is fear. So I was like, what's the opposite to this? How did I build this? How did I build self-confidence? How did I build self-trust? And that was just doing the repetition without worrying about the identity and worrying about the judgment and what everybody else thought. And the opportunity was, when I became scared of something, what's the opportunity I could take here to learn? How could I reframe it, like I was talking about with our language? How could I find a different path to improve or grow or reflect on what I'm doing here? And then the mindset is like how I'm responding to all that situation, how I'm responding to all those situations. Like, what are the habits that I'm building with repetition in my mindset? What are the mental characteristics I can build in my mindset? And then the systems part is all of it together. So how do I get all of those things together? So breaking through the emotion, not worrying about the fear, the judgment, the identity, all that sort of stuff. What are then the opportunities I can take out of that? How do I build that with habits and characteristics consistently, and then just keep that system in place of repetition? To me, it's about repetition, because a lot of us, when it comes, you mentioned goals earlier as well, we get to a certain point, we stop. Like New Year's resolutions, we may be consistent for 2 weeks, and then we fall off the bandwagon. And it's like pushing through consistency without seeing results is like the biggest killer of, like, if you're not seeing results, then you can't push through that consistency and discipline. And putting yourself through voluntary hardship, that's another aspect of it as well. Like, all those things help, right? The part of the systems is the ice bath. It is the meditation. It is the breath work, because the systems fall into place where those physiological feelings we hold in our body, not just in our minds, because we've got a physiological response there as well. How do we break those down? And we break those down with ice baths. We break those down with breath work. We break that down with heat exposure like sauna, because what that does, all these things put us in that voluntary fight or flight. And the more that we're in that voluntary fight or flight, the more we connect with the first time that emotion happened. And the more we connect with the first time that emotion happened, the easier it is for us to like push through adversity the next time it comes up.
Yeah, no,
There's a lot to it.
No, mate, it's very, very interesting. A few years ago, mate, this was in Sydney, I had a funnel web spider crawl very close to me, next to my foot. And, you know, they're a very dangerous and venomous spider. I think now they're regarded in the Guinness Book of World Records as the world's most venomous spider. And those things are fucking scary. With regards to someone that has a fear of spiders or arachnophobia or a fear of heights or a fear of claustrophobia, for example, I know my first introduction to BJJ, and you would probably experience this too. Someone that's quite heavy being pressed up against you, you can't move, you're feeling uncomfortable. What are some of the things that you have worked with your clients that might have some really big fears, whether it be arachnophobia or a fear of heights? How do you get them to a place where they feel a little bit more comfortable?
Yeah, it's coming back to like that association. Like there's something you use in NLP or neuro-linguistic programming called submodalities. And it's this process of getting yourself comfortable with the vision of that thing being associated, right? Because what a lot of us do is when we're in that moment of phobia, it's the picture, it's like we get the picture of the thing triggered, right? There's this picture that happens in our mind and we associate that immediately with that response or that emotion. So it's about how we change that response, that emotion with the picture that's being created, and how we disassociate from that in that moment. And there's different aspects and mechanisms. Like it's a very long-winded process to describe around phobias, and there is a fast model on how to do it, but that also comes down to disassociation and association as well.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And it does, mate. It requires a shit ton of work. And people that have been through some traumatic experiences, whether it be veterans in war or sexual assault survivors, and you know, people that have overcome that kind of stuff and trauma, what can be done as opposed to they are seeing a therapist and working through their traumas, but what else should that person be doing to really, you know, focus on improving their lives?
Yeah, and this is the same thing, right? Like when it comes down to trauma, it's like an association with it. Because what we do is when we've been through that event, we repress it and then we disassociate from it. And then there's obviously a physiological response that we associate with that particular time, and it gets stored in our nervous system. And with trauma, especially if it's a really intense kind of trauma, you're talking about like war or battle or like sexual assault as an example, you have to be really careful in which it's a process in how you re-engage and associate with that moment, because with those emotions you do have to reassociate yourself with that particular event, so you can start to give yourself, it's what we call perceptual positions. It's like re-looking at the event from your perspective, and then re-looking at the event from the other person's perspective that might have been involved with the trauma, and then re-looking at the event as an outsider observer and see how it all happened. Because when these things happen, we make them mean something about us, and as we make them mean something about us, this continues our surface level symptoms like stress, anxiety, our limiting beliefs, everything that we have created about what it means about us to have been through this event. So everything that goes back to associating with that trauma, it triggers that response straight away. It triggers that stress, that anxiety, those belief systems around what happened there. And we do everything we can to avoid that because it's been repressed in our unconscious mind. So it's about going back and associating with that moment. And like a simple way to do this is, staying really calm for one, and like when you're reassociating with that traumatic or that emotional event, going back and seeing it through your own eyes again, and then reassessing the situation and then maybe look at it from someone else's perspective. But it's also about being kind to yourself. We are the people that bring this trauma into our future, right? And this is like a bit of a controversial thing, because it's, that event happened to you, and yes, at that time, let's say if it's sexual assault as an example, that person, yes, they sexually assaulted you. Let's say it was 30 years ago, 20 years ago, because people hold on to this sort of thing for a very long time, and you always will. You're never gonna delete the memory. Your unconscious will delete it, but it will keep the symptom and the trigger there. So let's say you get to a point in life where you remember it and you know that it's okay that it happened, you're aware of it's happening, and you've gone back and you've associated with that traumatic moment, but it's okay to move your life forward. So when you go back there, yes, that person did that traumatic thing to you, but you are the one that continues to pour it into your future. So a lot of this is about accountability as well. Like, it's about, this thing happened to us, and there's that blame aspect. We're the victim. How could that person do this? They've ruined my entire life. Yes, they did that thing to you. Yes, there was a traumatic event that got stored in your mind at that time, but you are the one that continues to pour it into your future by continually focusing on it. So if you can go back to there, sort out all the association and disassociation, that emotions that happened in that moment, really feel through those. And it doesn't happen just overnight. Like, some people go back and they have to reassociate and go through those emotions and those traumas multiple times and multiple layers until they work through that event where they can get to a future point where it no longer affects them. And I'm going to reference somebody here, and this is Lewis Howes. I'm not sure if you know Lewis Howes, The School of Greatness. So he's quite open about the fact that he was sexually assaulted by a man that he didn't know when he was younger. He was like 13 maybe, so around that time, when he was a younger boy. And for such a long period of time, that affected him with the trigger and the emotion and the trauma through such a long period of time in his life. And he will famously state the fact that he wasn't able to begin working through that trauma until he actually told someone about it. And he went and he experienced it again by telling somebody about it and communicating about it and going back and feeling those things. So it sounds really counterintuitive, but we have to go back to that event. We have to associate with what happened, because when that happened, what we did is we shut off, we disassociated, we repressed the emotion, we repressed the memory. Yes, that memory is still there at some point. Yes, we know the trauma happened, but we just let it continue to affect us emotionally and trigger us for a long period of time into the future. And that happens through, like I said, it manifests up as stress, anxiety, procrastination, limiting beliefs like, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable. And you can see how these things can manifest, right? Let's say, for example, like, you get someone that's been sexually assaulted, then you think, why did nobody protect me? Am I not worthy enough to be protected? Even though maybe nobody knew what was happening at the time. Well, I'm not lovable because now I'm full of shame because I've been sexually tainted at a young age. There's these different things that we create and we make them mean something about us. So we need to go back and reassociate and know that, yes, that person did that thing at that time, but we're the one that continues to bring it into our future. So we need to go back, reassociate with it, work through that emotion so we can stop taking it forward into the future.
Yeah. I think there's a sickness going on in the world right now, mate. And you're seeing a lot of the younger generation, consuming a lot of social media and TikTok, and more and more people, I think, are becoming anxious and depressed. And one of the things that I'm truly fascinated is mental health regarding men, because I think there still is this stigma that men have this idea that they need to be stoic 24/7, and then being able to expressively share their vulnerability in a safe way. And this comes down to having a good support network and a group of people, whether it be men's workshops or, going camping in the mountains with the boys and chatting about your personal problems and things. What is society doing wrong, mate? Because this is something that I really think needs to be a change, because Chris Williams famously said, who's a podcaster who's been on Joe Rogan, and he's worked with a lot of psychotherapists and things like that. And he was talking to one once, and he said that male depression gets treated like female depression when all men want is they want to feel capable and powerful. And he used this analogy, well, not analogy, but this the story about the Blitz, which happened in World War II, where they had these comatose patients confined to a bed who were just completely unresponsive. And when all the bombs and stuff started happening, and there was casualties and injured people, there was no one to drive ambulances, fire engines, and trucks. These men got up out of their beds, who were completely comatose, unresponsive for years and years and years, got up and started driving fire engines, ambulances, and started rescuing people. Give a man a purpose and the ability to achieve it, and he will crawl over broken glass with a smile. And I love that quote, mate. What do you think society gets wrong about men's mental health, vulnerability, and what can be done?
I feel it's communication. Like, I'm a big thing of impact through communication. And, we have things like Are You OK Day as an example, right? Though there's a general education that needs to be happening around. Let's say, for example, on Are You OK Day, you say to someone, Are you OK? And they will just say no. What's the next response? What happens there? How are you equipped to deal with that response? And who are you going to turn to, or who are you going to talk to help about that response that happens? So, a big thing for me is just about communication, and it's for me because I've always been wanted to be an open communicator, although I always haven't been. Though this is part of why I wanted to do neuro-linguistic programming, is to make sure that I could express what I'm saying correctly on top of all the other things that go along with that type of training. And I think the way that we talk to each other, because what happens is, the generations that we've previously grown up in is like, toughen up, toughen up. And yes, there's a bit of a spotlight now on what we're doing to improve that, to make people talk up when they're okay, which is great. And though, how are we responding when someone says they're not great? What is the process that is happening after someone says that they're not great? And generally, it's like go down the path of like seeing a doctor, maybe seeing a psychologist, going on medication. And there's the other aspects, like you said, when you talk about, people being addicted to TikTok and all these different things. But there's a lot of misinformation that happens around that as well, which is like, people do dopamine detoxes and all this sort of stuff. But there's no way to detox dopamine. Dopamine's a neurotransmitter. It doesn't really run out, but it gets produced in different ways. And it's about how do we get people to get a good, daily dose of your dopamine, your oxytocin, your serotonin, and your endorphins. And that's obviously through doing different things like hugging people, talking to people, getting outside, getting sunlight, putting your feet on the ground, doing exercise. There's all these different things that we can be doing. To me, it always just comes back to how can we communicate better? Like, how can we ask the right questions? And this is where it comes down to linguistics. Like, how do we ask the right questions?
Yeah.
Are you, I'm not really okay. Okay, so how specifically are you not okay? Oh, well, I've been doing, I've been not getting out of bed in the morning. Okay, for what purpose are you not getting out of bed? I just don't feel like I can tackle the day. What specific about the day can't you tackle? So there's, it's about how we really investigate, and it's like called a chunking down investigation process. And what it really does is like it helps us really investigate what is actually going on. And this is why communication is important to me, because when we investigate what's really happening, because there's another thing, another presupposition of NLP is like the map is not the territory. Someone saying I'm not feeling good, I can't get out of bed. When you really investigate what's going on, it might be something completely different. It's not the fact that they're depressed and they can't get out of bed. It's the fact that every Thursday they go see their mum, and their mum talks terribly to them, and they put these limiting beliefs and different things, and that they might not be consciously aware that relationship is affecting them. But like, if you can investigate that process through communication, you can start to figure out where you can start to move and shift things around to give somebody a better life.
Yeah. Yeah, mate. What's truly heartbreaking, Tom, is if you think of these individuals, Robin Williams, the guy from Ellen DeGeneres, who was, I think his name was Stephen Twitch, Chris Cornell, who was a famous musician from Soundgarden, Chester Bennington, who was a famous musician from Linkin Park. Tragically, these men took their own life, and it was so sad. And I think Chester Bennington from Linkin Park, his widow, his wife, at that time, she said that the day before he killed himself, he had such a fantastic day. He was at the beach with his family, and they were having such a wonderful time. And it really is. It's very sad that we don't know how to address men's mental health, and asking the right questions is just so important. So I have a question, mate. If someone you think might be in a situation where they could be harming themselves, what are the right questions to ask them, and what are the steps that need to be done? Because I think this is quite scary, mate, and this really speaks to the heart for me, because I have lost mates to suicide, and I've obviously been in situations myself where I've overcome some adversity, and we all go through hard times and struggle, but this can be really difficult for men to talk about these problems. What should that person do, and how should we talk about it, and what should we do to address it?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things, like, I'll come back to communication again, and there's a big difference between somebody saying that they're going to harm themselves and somebody that's actually equipped to harm themselves. And generally, it's a really hard person to try and pinpoint who that is. And there's key things like, for example, if someone was to reach out to you and say that I'm going to commit suicide, you keeping the conversation alive is one thing, and obviously getting them to focus on what is the outcome that you can gain in the future, right? And because we're always going to give reasons to why we're having a hard time. We're going to give reasons like, why do you want to commit suicide? Because this is hard. Because that's hard. This is hard. So how can we turn it to like, okay, so what can you be doing to make it easier, and how could you be changing things? So start to get them to think about, what could I be doing? How could I be changing it? Rather than thinking about all the reasons why we want to end our life. Because if you continue to focus on all the reasons why you want to end your life, it's going to give you a pretty good confirmation bias as why you should. And like I said, there's a difference between, usually find someone that's pretty unresponsive if they say something like, I'm done, and there's not much communication. And that's the time where we need to act. We need to call police. We need to call somebody to do a welfare check straight away, as opposed to somebody that's really open about wanting to commit suicide, because generally this is more of a validation piece. And it's really hard to discern, right?
Yeah.
You'll see patterns in people that are consistently say it, and they won't ever act on it, right? But there's people that show actions which make them pretty evident that we should be having further conversations as, why are you feeling this way? And when they give you the reason, you go, okay, how can you change it? What can you be doing differently? And start to get them to focus on the good outcomes, rather than continuing to focus on all the reasons why they should do it. Because if you continue to focus on all those reasons, like I said, you're going to get that confirmation bias. And I know that you've spoken to Sammy, and her brother passed away as well. And I dare say it was a very similar situation with him. There was outlandish physical signs that he was harming, right? And outside of that, I believe he was pretty silent about his journey. And these are the people that we have to worry about, the ones that are quite silent. And that's where it comes back to this communication piece. And it's hard to discern, right? It's really hard to discern. Like you said, Chester Bennington, he had a great day the day before. Though, where in that day would he have communicated that he was about to take his own life? Like, it just doesn't come up. Yeah. So it's about discerning who's serious about it, who's not. Get them to tell you the reasons why they want to do it, and then shift that focus to, okay, what can you be doing to change that, and how can you be changing it?
Yeah. And it's a daily practice, mate. Yep. And as we were talking about, the human brain is your most powerful weapon. And I know from personal experience that I'm in a much better headspace when I'm doing the things I'm supposed to be doing. Sunlight, vitamin D, huge. Regulating my nervous system through daily breathing exercises. Sleep, 100% paramount. They've done a shit ton of study on sleep and why that's so important for men's mental health, or just anybody, for example. It's crucial for mental health. It's exercise. Exercise has a profound effect, just as, if not better than taking medication. And some of the things I think that's interesting listening to you, mate, is the personal development world and the daily practices and what we can do. And what really strikes me is there's not a lot of, like, if you think about this, right, mate, you have advertisements on TV, right, for drinking, gambling and smoking. Where's the advertisement on what to do and how to regulate your nervous system? What to do if you feel really, really upset? You know, they talk about Are You OK campaign. And I talked to Dean Lawler a while back, who's regarded as one of the best self-defense experts.
Pardon my charger. Hang on a sec.
You're all right, mate.
Sorry, I thought it was plugged in.
Yeah. So Dean Lawler, who I talked to, we were talking about the coward punch, which happened. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of incidents where people have died. They've hit their head on the pavement after being striked. And Danny Green famously put a campaign out about the coward punch, and it really did create a bit of a movement. I think it needs to have that shock factor, and people really need to understand that we can do better. And what do you think society can do better with regards to mental health, the usage and the deleterious side of social media? So social media is great, too much is not so good. You know, and I think parents need to intervene and educate their children with screen time, because I think their brains just can't comprehend the amount of dopamine that they're getting. Because you and I, mate, we were born in the 80s. We grew up in the 90s. We didn't have social media back then. You know, we were outside playing and, you know, playing in the dirt and, you know, going over to mates' houses and stuff like that. So what can society do to have a better functioning society with regards to mental health?
I think all of it comes back to gratitude at the end of the day. Like, and it sounds like you hear that get thrown around a lot. Be grateful, the gratitude piece. But it's really important. It's really important because when you have gratitude from a place of, I have everything I want and need. Like if you do an audit and go, am I actually healthy? Am I happy? Do I have everything that I need? And a lot of the times the answer is yes, and that advertising and all those things, they come down to want. It's like, I want this next thing. When I have that next thing, I will be happy. When I have that car, I'll be happy. When I have that house, I'll be happy. When I have those shoes, I'll be happy. And this is where the advertising comes into play and the social media comes into play, especially when you're comparing yourself to other people that might be more successful than you, as an example. So a daily gratitude practice will go a long way in people being more happy and more content with what they're doing. And this can be as simple as like journaling 3 things every single morning that you're grateful for. And this is something that Tony Robbins famously does. He calls it priming. Does a bit of breath work in the morning, and he writes down 3 things that he's grateful for in his universe, 3 things that he wants to achieve in his universe, and there's 3 other things I can't remember off the top of my head right now. But within that priming is that gratitude piece. And the more you focus on gratitude and what you have, the more abundant you feel. And when you feel abundant, you have no need or want for things. And when you have no need or want for things, you're not constantly searching for that next dopamine hit. Because you can sit around and look at your life and go, hey, I've got what I need here. And as long as that you do that check and you do that audit, like, and this is the same thing I used to say a lot about with anxiety, and I still do, is that when someone says to me, I've got really bad anxiety, like, how do I deal with my anxiety? It's like, do a bit of an audit, like, come down, like, are you okay? Like, is what's happening in your environment right now okay? Like, are you in threat? Are you in danger? Can you just be aware of the thoughts that are coming in and let them pass by? And it's the same thing with want and need and all these things that drive mental health issues, is that people are constantly searching for more. They're wanting more. Where if you can do that audit and be grateful and be aware of, especially the country like Australia as an example, the country that we live in is like, look at the houses we live in, look at the clothes we wear, like look at the things that we have access to that a lot of people don't have. And we just spend a lot of time not being grateful for that.
Yeah.
It's the most important thing.
You nailed it, mate. Gratitude is such an important topic and has a profound impact on your mental space. Yeah, it's so true. We have so many things to be grateful for, and that is
the other thing is, like you mentioned as well, like so much going on in the world, and I feel things like the media, the general media, they're always pushing a narrative, and this is not a conspiracy direction. It's just like it's just what they've always done. They've just said this is what's going on in the world, and generally a large percentage of that is the negative, right? And my parents and their parents before them, they're not 6 p.m. 9 News is gospel. Like what's going on there is what their life is, and they follow that narrative. And it's funny because I get my dad send me random texts of stuff all the time, like, look out, there's people trying to scam us for this in our mail at the moment, and all these type of things. And like, that's not even on my radar. I couldn't even care if someone's trying to scam me. It's like,
that's so true.
On what makes me happy, mate. Like it's such a big thing.
That is so true, mate.
I spend so much time focusing on all the bad things that the people are going to do to me. I'm going to be in this place of fear all the time.
Yeah, it's interesting. My mum, I love my mum, but yeah, she sent me news articles about, certain things that you have to be wary of. And yeah, you're right. If you focus on all the negative things, you're going to go nuts. Where focus goes, energy grows. Yeah, it's so interesting you said that, mate. Mate, we'll wrap this up because I know you've got to bounce, but just before you go, mate, tell us a little bit about your program, what's coming up in the next few months with your workshops, because I highly encourage everyone to jump on your program, jump in with you, mate, do some one-on-one coaching. I really do understand the importance of mentors, mate, and I've had some amazing mentors over the years, not just in martial arts, but personal development, health and fitness, that kind of stuff. I've spent thousands and thousands of dollars on personal development, and I never regret it, mate. And I've worked with you, mate. I consider you a mate, but also a mentor. You're a remarkable person, an amazing human being, and what you've achieved and what you've accomplished and the value that you're giving back to the community. It's the world is a much better place with you in it, mate. But tell us before you bounce, what's happening with you, mate, over the next few months.
Yeah, so in the foreseeable future, do you release these straight away, these podcasts, or do you?
This one will be released in the next few weeks, so I sort of bang them out and then I release one once a week.
So generally then, like, I've got a day workshop, like a half-day workshop that I'll do every sort of 6 to 8 weeks, which involves, it'll change up a bit coming into winter because people are pretty reluctant to do ice baths in winter and they won't book or buy tickets, but usually
I'll be there, mate. I'll do one in winter.
Cool. Yeah, so will I. A lot of people don't realise that it's not as cold in winter. It just feels like it's cold.
Yeah.
And so that involves ice baths, a bit of meditation, a little bit of mindset chat, and some holotropic breath work, trauma release breath work as well. And the next workshop, I've also added in vibrational healing and sound healing as well. So it's just sort of changing them up a bit as we go along. So those day workshops, and I do free online masterclasses, and we'll start to turn those into courses online into my website. And then if anyone wants to work with me personally, I do life and mindset coaching, and that's basically like an 8-week program, and we just go through all those aspects of your life and see what are the things that might be holding you back, so we can give you some tools and resources to start looking toward what you want in life and really get what you want out of life. And then we just map that across to all areas of your life, business, relationships, parenting, whatever it might be. 8-week programs, half-day workshops. I'll have some group online containers coming up as well after the next workshop, and hopefully doing more events and speaking events towards later in 2024 as well.
Yeah, I encourage everyone that's listening to this to really dive into personal development and hit Tom up, mate. He's a remarkable person. Tom, mate, you're on the socials. People can find you on Instagram and things like that.
Yeah. So Instagram is just it's that Tom's method, my framework. So it's TOMS_method, Tom's method, and then just Tom Dunphy, DUNPHY on Facebook as well. Pretty easy to find.
Fantastic, mate. Always a pleasure to sit down and chat with you.
Thank you, brother. Same as you, and I love what you're doing, and I'm just love seeing you doing it. I can see the spark in your eye, and I'm glad that you're pushing hard with this. And
I love this, mate. Yeah, I love podcasting. I love talking to people, learning about their experiences and what they've overcome and how they've gotten to where they are. Yeah, I love this. So, mate, I appreciate you. And thank you for everything that you've been doing, mate, online and, with what we've been working through, mate. I appreciate you, mate.
Thank you. Cheers, mate.
Cheers, mate.